He soon recovered his self-possession. I am not a baby to worry about these things. What can anybody do to me? He resolutely fixed his gaze on the hard knobs on his box, gave its contents a final pat, and was about to draw down the lid when the other man suddenly stooped, thrust his hand inside and picked out a handful of papers, demanding, "How did you come by these?"
"These are our application forms." Margaya checked the indignation that was rising within him. "Put them back, will you? What right have you to put your hand into my box?"
"You look like an educated man. Don't you know that ordinary simple law?" In his indignation he lost for a moment all fear.
Arul Das came forward and said, "Take care how you speak. He is our secretary. He will hand you over to the police."
"Stop your nonsense, you earthworm. Things have come to this, have they, when every earthworm pretends that it is a cobra and tries to sway its hood. I will nip off your head as well as your tail, if you start any of your tricks with me. Take care."
"Get out of my way." Arul Das was cowed. He withdrew a little, but he was not to be dismissed so easily.
He began, "He is our secretary." "That's all right. It's written all over him," yelled Margaya.
"What else can he be? He can speak for himself, can't he? You keep away, you miserable 10-rupee earner."
"I want none of your impertinence here. If you want an old piece of cloth, torn or used, come to me." The secretary seemed to watch all this with detachment.
Arul Das fretted inwardly, tried to be officious, but had to withdraw because the secretary himself ordered him away. "You go over there," he said, indicating a spot far off. Arul Das moved reluctantly away.
Margaya felt triumphant, and turned his attention to the man before him. "Secretary, you will put back that paper or I will call the police now." "Yes, I want to call the police myself."
"You are in possession of something that belongs to our office." "No, it belongs to the shareholders." "Are you a shareholder?"
"Yes, more than that." "Nonsense. Don't make false statements."
"You'll get into trouble. Reports have come to me of your activities. Here is my warning.
If you are seen here again, you will find yourself in prison. Go." He nodded to Ami Das to come nearer, and held out to him the loan application forms. Arul Das avidly seized them and carried them off like a trophy.
The secretary abruptly turned round and walked back to the porch of the building, where his car was waiting. Presently Margaya bundled up his belongings and started homeward. With his box under his arm and his head bowed in thought, he wandered down the market road.
He paused for a moment at the entrance of the Regal hair-cutting saloon, in whose doorway a huge looking-glass was kept. He saw to his dismay that he was still wearing his spectacles. He pulled them off quickly, folded up their sides and put them into his pocket.
He didn't feel flattered at the sight of his own reflection. "I look like a wayside barber with this little miserable box under my arm. People probably expect me to open the lid and take out soap and a brush.
No wonder the secretary feels he can treat me as he likes. If I looked like him, would he have dared to snatch the papers from my box? I can't look like him.
I am destined to look like a wayside barber, and that is my fate. I am only fit for the company of those blanket-wrapped rustics." He was thoroughly vexed with himself and his lot.
He moved to the side of the road, as cyclists rang their bells and dodged him, Jutka men shouted at him, and pedestrians collided against him. His mind was occupied with thoughts of his own miserableness. He felt himself shrinking.
2 students emerged laughing and talking from the Bombay Anand Bhavan, their lips red with betel leaves. They stared at Margaya. "They are laughing at me," he thought.
Perhaps they want to ask me to go with them to their rooms and give them a haircut. He kept glancing over his shoulder at them, and caught them turning and glancing at him too, with a grin on their faces. Somebody driving by in a car of the latest model seemed to look at him for a fleeting second, and Margaya fancied that he caught a glimpse of contempt in his eyes.
Now at the western end of Market Road he saw the VN stores, with its owner standing at the door. "He may put his hand into my pocket and snatch the glasses or compel me to give him a shave." He sidestepped into Kabir Lane, and, feeling ashamed of the little box that he carried under his arm, wished he could fling it away, but his sense of possession would not let him.
As he passed through the narrow Kabir Lane, with small houses abutting the road, people seemed to stare at him as if to say, "Barber, come early tomorrow morning. You must be ready here before I go for my bath. He hurried off. He reached Vinayak Street, raced up the steps of his house and flung the box unceremoniously under the bench.
His wife was washing the child on the back veranda. At the sound of his arrival, the little fellow let out a yell of joy, threw the towel. "What's happened to make you come back so early?" asked Margaya's wife.
Early? Why, can't I come home when I please? I am nobody's slave.
She had tried to tidy herself up in the evening after the day's work. "She looks." He noticed how plebeian she looked, with her faded jacket, her patched, discolored sari and her anemic eyes. "How can anyone treat me respectfully when my wife is so indifferent looking?"
His son came up and clung to his hand. "Father, what have you brought me today?" He picked him up on his arm. "Can't you put him into a cleaner shirt?"
he asked. "He has only 4, his wife answered. "And he has already soiled 3 today."
"I have been telling you to buy some clothes. Don't start all that now. I am in no mood for lectures."
His wife bit her lips and made a wry face. The child let out a howl for no reason whatever. She felt annoyed and said, "He is always like this.
He is all right till you come home. But the moment you step in, he won't even finish washing his face. Where should I go if you don't want me to return home?"
"Nobody said such a thing," she replied sullenly. The little boy shouted, put his hand into his father's coat pocket and pulled out his reading glasses, and insisted upon putting them over his own nose. His mother cried, "Give those glasses back or I'll..."
She raised her arm, at which he started yelling so much that they could not hear each other's remarks. Margaya carried him off to a shop and bought him sweets, leaving his wife behind, fretting with rage. In the quiet of midnight, Margaya spoke to his wife seriously. "Do you know why we get on each other's nerves and quarrel?"
"Yes," she said at last. "Now let me sleep." And turned over.
Margaya stretched out his hand and shook her by the shoulder. "Wake up. I have much to tell you."
"Can't you wait till the morning?" she asked. "No."
He spoke to her of the day's events. She sat up in bed. "Who is that secretary?"
"What right has he to threaten you?" "He has every right because he has more money, authority, dress, looks, above all, more money. It's money which gives people all this."
"Money alone is important in this world. Everything else will come to us naturally if we have money in our purse." She said, "You shouldn't have been so rude to Arul Das."
"You should not have said that you'd employ the secretary. That's not the way to speak to people earning 500 rupees a month. Let him get 5,000, what do I care?"
"I can also earn 1,000 or 5,000, and then these fellows will have to look out." Much of his self-assurance was returning in the presence of his wife. All the despair and inferiority that he had been feeling was gradually leaving him.
He felt more self-confident and aggressive. He felt he could hold out his hand and grab as much of the good things of life as he wanted. He felt himself being puffed up with hope and plans and self-assurance.
He said, "Even you will learn to behave with me when I have money. Your rudeness now is understandable. For isn't there a famous saying, 'He that hath not is spurned even by his wife, even the mother that bore him spurns him.'"
It was a very wise man who said it. "Well, you will see. I'll not carry about that barber's box anymore, and I'll not be seen in this torn dhoti.
I will become respectable like anyone else. That secretary will have to call me, Mr., and stand up when I enter. No more torn mats and dirty, greasy saris for you.
Our boy will have a cycle, he will have a suit and go to a convent in a car. And those people," he indicated the next house, "will have to wonder and burst their hearts with envy. He will have to come to me on his knees and wait for advice."
I have finished with those villagers. He became like one possessed. He was agitated, as if he had made a startling discovery.
He couldn't yet afford to keep away from the place where he worked. He went there as usual, but he had taken care to tidy himself up as much as possible. He wore a lace-edged dhoti which he normally kept folded in his box.
It was of fine texture, but much yellowed now. He had always kept it in his box with a piece of camphor, and he now smelt like an incense holder as he emerged from his small room, clad in this gorgeous dhoti. It had been given to him, as it now seemed a century and a half ago, on the day of his wedding when he was sitting beside his wife on a flower-decked swing, surrounded by a lot of women folk joking and singing and teasing the newlyweds, after the feast at night.
He sighed at the thought of those days. How they had fussed about him and tried to satisfy his smallest request and keep him pleased in every way. How eminent he had felt then.
People seemed to feel honored when he spoke to them. He had only to turn his head even slightly for someone or other to come rushing up and inquire what his wishes were. He had thought that would continue forever.
What a totally false view of life one acquired on one's wedding day. It reminded him of his brother. How he bargained with the bride's people over the dowry.
He used to be so fond of him. His brother's face stood out prominently from among the wedding group in Margaya's memory, as he sat in the corner, beyond the sacrificial smoke, in their village home. Margaya sighed at the memory of it. They had got on quite nicely, but their wives couldn't.
If women got on smoothly, half the trouble in this world is due to women who cannot tolerate each other. His wife was amused to see him so gaudily dressed. What's the matter?
She asked. Are you going to a wedding party? This is the only good one I have.
They will never see me in that again, he said, indicating his discarded dhoti. Keep it and give it to Amidas. He may come for it.
He was pleased with his own venom aimed at the distant Arul Das. This quiet pleasure pricked his veins and thrilled his body. He put on a new shirt which he had stitched 2 years ago but had not had the heart to wear, always reserving it for some future occasion.
The child too seemed to be quite pleased to see his father in a new dress. He clapped his hands in joy and left him in peace, concentrating his attention on a piece of elephant made of lacquer-painted wood. Margaya had elaborately tied up his dhoti, with folds going up, in the dignified Pune style, instead of the southern fashion, looked down upon by people of other provinces.
He explained to his wife, you see, if we are treated with contempt by people, it is our fault. Our style of tying dhoti and our style of dressing, it is all so silly. No wonder.
He talked like a man who had just arrived from a far-off land. He spoke with such detachment and superiority. His wife was somewhat taken aback. She treated him with the utmost consideration when she served him his frugal meal.
Usually he would have to ask, food ready? Food ready? Several times and then pick up his plate and sit down and wait indefinitely as she kept blowing the fire.
If he said, hurry up, please, she would retort, with my breath gone, blowing on this wet firewood, have you the heart, etc. But today she said, your plate is there, food is ready. She served him quietly, with a sort of docile agreeableness.
I got this brinjal from the back garden, she said. You didn't know I had a garden? No. Nice stuff, he murmured agreeably.
Even the little fellow ate his food quietly, only once letting out a shout when he thought his mother wouldn't serve him his ghee. On that occasion he threw a handful of rice in his mother's face. She just ignored it, instead of flying at him, and the episode ended there.
At the end of the meal, Margaya picked up his plate as usual to wash and restore it to its corner in the kitchen. But she at once said, oh, don't, I will attend to it.